This is Georgia tight end Brock Bowers.
I'm looking at my notes of the first round tight ends, Kyle Pitts, Eric Ebron. I'm looking at the 17th percentile height. I'm looking at the 12th percentile weight. I don't care, man. This guy's so good. We can talk about the missing athletic profile, but the positional value is going to matter. But to me, this is one of the best tight end prospects I've seen. Third best in my model. Kyle Pitts and Brock Bowers, they're not even playing the same type of position here. By far, the best age and team adjusted production since 2005. And I just see a lot of athletic traits out in the flats. I think that's where he's going to be used differently than Kyle Pitts, who is more of a downfield type of guy.
Brock Bowers is awesome. He is so much fun to watch. I mean, he is the elevated version of the archetype that so many people fall in love with. You know, that athletic move tight end who plays with tenacity and somewhat controlled chaos. We'll get into that in a moment. Just some numbers that matter here. 6'3", 243 pounds, 23rd percentile height, 12th percentile weight for the position, 37th percentile wingspan on top of that. And Hayden, his role at Georgia was kind of fascinating over these last 2 years. Let's just take 2022 and 2023. 52 of 156 of his targets were screens, and then another 62 on top of that were out of the slot. A major part of that was obviously in 2022, he played next to Darnell Washington, who was a massive human being and a very different type of tight end that Brock Bowers brings to the table. And if we again look over the last two seasons, 78 of his targets were out of the slot, 47 were in line, and 22 were outside. And so, at least on paper, and obviously when you're watching them, this is almost that movable chess piece that is what so many fan bases crave for the tight end position, and there aren't enough talents out there to fulfill that.
He could be used in the seams and out in the flats, and obviously the screens are a part of that. He actually led college football in yards after the catch in all 3 seasons. He immediately broke out at Georgia as a freshman, sophomore, and junior, led the position in yards after the catch. Last year, 8.5 yards after the catch. For reference, the NFL leader in yards after the catch was 5.6. That was George Kittle, Jonnu Smith, David Njoku. So we're just talking about somebody that just boogies out there, and you should start seeing some of these corners try to tackle him, and they're just not having a good time. He's bigger than those types out there, so he can break some tackles out there, but he also has some speed to kind of turn the corner. We even saw on a couple end arounds at Georgia getting him out there. So I think that's the difference, is just he's going to be somebody that you can scheme up touches immediately. He's not going to be playing out wide. He can do that on occasion. I think we kind of oversell, like, oh, he's just going to play X receiver on some of the snaps. A couple times they throw some jump fades in those situations, but he's not running routes from there. Instead, out of the slot, he can run option routes, he can run crossing routes, he can just win down the seam, he can win at the catch point. He's got some nice hops on tape and play through contact ability. But to me, the special talent here is just throw the ball out in the flats and watch this guy cook.
Evan Ingram does that at the NFL level. You know, a lot of split flow action that they have in Jacksonville. And then here he is working across the line of scrimmage, across the formation, the ball in his hands early, and they allow him to rumble after the catch. I would add that Brock Bowers is probably a bit more physical than Evan Ingram brings to the table. And then, as you talked about, so many of, I thought, his man-to-man targets, someone was in his hip pocket, and they threw a bunch of those targets away from his frame, just above his helmet, asked him to adjust, and he did a very good job of that, throwing his back shoulder away. The timing aspect of that with strong hands at that moment, because even when corners or safeties or linebackers or whoever were trying to fight through his hands to disrupt the catch, oftentimes he was strong enough, and again, close enough to his frame, that he was able to win in those environments. Yeah, I mean, slippery after the catch, I would add too. Like, he squirms for extra yards. And what really stood out to me was how, if he does get a free release or after the catch and there's no one out there to tackle because the presentation of the play was so good, he eats up the first 10 yards of ground, chews it up to the level of a bunch of wide receivers that he is around.
98th percentile yards per game during his career, 64 of them. 98th percentile in his peak amount of touchdowns among drafted prospects. Like I said, it was only Kyle Pitts and Vernon Davis who projected better according to my model here. He's just incredible. And I think that some of the weight issues that he has, I think that his frame means he's going to be able to put on a couple extra pounds. He's 21 years old. I think that just looking at like that picture where you're standing next to Gronk.
Yeah, I don't think he's very broad.
Yeah, but I think he's going to be able to put some weight on, just
Yeah.
enough. He's more like you said, Evan Ingram, Dalton Kincaid, Travis Kelce, like that type of mold of tight end. He's not your classic Gronk tight end, but I don't think that you have to be the classic Gronk tight end, especially if he's going to be your number 2 pass catcher in the offense. Sam Laporta was somebody that came across in my notes with Brock Bowers, because Sam Laporta back in 2022, he led college football in missed tackles. Number
Yep.
2 in that stat was Brock Bowers. So yeah, he's going to be a layup to be a top 5, top 10 tight end in the NFL. He's not going to do everything in your offense. I think he fights as a blocker. There's at times he can block an edge rusher, definitely can block a linebacker at the second level in the run game. But I think you're drafting him because that yards after the catch ability, and then some of the contested catch situations. It's just pretty rare for this position.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, about the inline capabilities, because again, he played next to Darnell Washington in 2022, and then was more of the isolated tight end, I felt, in 2023. I think he's a fine blocker. He is willing, like you said, he gives effort. There are several times, and people can pull them up, where he drives his man into the ground or to the sideline or shoves them out of the hole. I also felt there were dozens of times where he whiffed on plays too, or his guy made tackles on top of that. But again, that's not going to be the name of his game. He has to be like a willing and capable blocker to be out there in every single scenario. I mentioned a usage of the early catches that we've seen from Evan Ingram. That's not the comp. The comp is to me, Sam Laporta. And this might freak people out, but like if he turns into Sam Laporta, that would be an awesome outcome. Sam Laporta was a second team All-Pro during his rookie season and won at all 3 levels of the field. What I really noticed was Georgia knew the type of player that they had, because most of his man-to-man routes were these vertical downfield catches, which says that he's obviously bigger and faster than anyone that Georgia was going to face up against in the SEC. Sometimes it was corners, sometimes it was safeties, sometimes it was against linebackers. My question to you is, how do you think NFL defenses are going to treat him when they see him out on the field in 12 personnel, as a wide receiver or as a tight end? Because this was kind of the big dilemma that the Buffalo Bills had once drafting Dalton Kincaid. The opposition turned into nickel, and the Buffalo Bills were not capable of being successful or efficient enough in those nickel situations. So then basically the person that was facing off or covering had an extra defensive back on the field.
I think Brock Bowers is more physical than Dalton Kincaid. I think that's why the Bills have to use 2 tight end sets, and they put him into the slot as a wide receiver. And that's when I think you lose some of the mismatch advantages. I think that Brock Bowers, to me, just 11 personnel, and then you can keep him in line if you need to. And then if you want to go just 2 wide receivers on each side and call Brock Bowers one of them, I think that's the type of role that I would like love to see him, like on the Bengals, for example, if he kind of falls a little bit. He's kind of in this like 10th overall to 18th overall type of range here, and we'll get to the positional value. But I want him, a quarterback that's going to throw the ball to him in the flats. I think that Brock Bowers has shown a good ability to sit in zone coverage as well, which is obviously very important in the NFL. He's going to be labeled as a tight end. I don't think that his receiving traits are so exceptional as a route runner and stuff that you have to treat him as a wide receiver, but he's going to be facing slot corners. He's going to be facing some safeties that rotate down. He's going to face some linebackers. If it's a play action against a linebacker, well, Brock Bowers is going to cook him on a play action route down the field. I think that he has that separation ability. I want him to be treated as the number 2 pass catcher in an offense, the guy that you're manufacturing touches to, because I do think he's like that type of special athlete with the ball in his hands.
I think I do, for all 3 downs, have maybe more questions than you do to isolate him as the lone tight end on the field. I mentioned the blocking aspect of that, because in those scenarios, he's going to have to face a defensive end one-on-one, and that even gave him trouble, I thought, at times at the college level.
He's average at it.
And then, if we're talking about him as a receiver in line, only 18 targets started when he was in line that were 5+ yards down the field. So it was, if I was in line or as an H-back, again, it was a lot of screens or underneath stuff. And that was over the last 2 years, I believe. 18 targets over the last 2 years that were 5+ yards. Yeah, I mean, what you talked about, his route running, he's an angry, mean route runner. He stomps the ground and he'll whip his head to try to create these separation off of these breaks. And he does a pretty good job of it. But again, what I was even more impressed by was when a defender was in his hip pocket, jump balls, adjusting for catches, making tough grabs. He was frequently successful at that, when a lot of other players, either at tight end, are uncertain of those scenarios, aren't as comfortable in those scenarios, and then obviously comparing him to just pass catchers, which I think is a conversation we should probably have too. Like, how would you compare him to the top 3 receivers that we have in this class, and then everyone after that? Is it fair? Because I think you and I believe, can you really compare Brock Bowers, who's mostly going to be a slot inside player, versus someone like Brian Thomas or Adonai Mitchell, who is going to be a perimeter outside the numbers type wide receiver?
So I'm just going to go look right to the NFL salary caps by position and just kind of look at how high paid each position is. And wide receivers, the top 5 guys, $25 million per year. Tight ends is at $14 million. I feel very comfortable with Brock Bowers' evaluation, but compared to Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, and Marvin Harrison, I don't think that they're in the same ballpark, just because the contract value that you're talking about. Even Travis Kelce isn't paid anywhere near as high paid as like Tyreek Hill, for example. So I think that's kind of the dilemma with Brock Bowers. And same thing with offensive linemen. They're making $25 million a year. Defensive tackles, $22 million a year. It's basically tight ends and running backs. So this would be like, to me, like if Christian McCaffrey was coming out, where it's a little bit undersized, but we know he's going to be phenomenal based on the production and age and athletic traits. Do you draft him 4th overall? I'm not sure. Do you draft him 12th, 13th overall? I think that's where the conversation gets started here. So I would take the top 3 wide receivers over Brock Bowers. I am still debating. My number 4 is Brian Thomas. Brian Thomas versus Brock Bowers would be an interesting conversation.
But they almost fulfill like totally different roles on an NFL offense.
But if I'm looking for a number 2, let's say if I have a stud number 1 wide receiver, I'm looking to replace T. Higgins, for example. Do I want to go Brian Thomas or do I want to go with Brock Bowers? I think that's kind of the tier. Maybe you have the same conversation with like A.D. Mitchell, your wide receiver 4. So I think that's where, when we're talking about the athletic traits, there's been 51 tight ends that have gone round 1 or 2 since 2005. Only 3 of them, Dalton Kincaid, Heath Miller, and Pat Freiermuth, didn't have athletic scores. Neither does Brock Bowers. I don't think that conversation matters all that much, except if you're the Jets and it's Brock Bowers versus an offensive tackle. I think that those little tiebreakers are where we're talking about. So I think I would draft him in the teens. I don't think I would draft him inside the top 10. I think he's going to come into the NFL immediately and produce. I don't think we have to worry about the Kyle Pitts stuff as much. And by the way, Kyle Pitts would be much better without that injury that he picked up, because Kyle Pitts was working down the field, a little bit more volatile, a little bit more reliant on the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Pitts gets none of the short screen stuff that Brock Bowers gets.
I don't care if Brock Bowers' quarterback is going to be. He's going to get numbers just because it's a function of the offense. So I feel very comfortable, straightforward evaluation for Brock Bowers. I just think that the positional value does matter. And I think he's probably, to me, like the 15th best player in the draft, but also one of the safest prospects in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I do want to talk about the athletic testing stuff, because as we discussed last year with Dalton Kincaid, special tight ends are special athletes. And that's more so at tight end versus any other position. RAS is not a perfect composite score out there for athleticism. And I would say that Pro Bowls is not a perfect barometer of NFL talent, but roughly 70% of tight ends since 2001 who have made the Pro Bowl are elite athletes, outstanding athletes, not just good, outstanding athletes. And then to take it one step further, just 17 tight ends since 1991 have recorded a 1,000-yard receiving season. 11 of the 16 are on record with outstanding special athletic profiles. The 17th is Antonio Gates. We can assume one way or the other with that. So with all that said, as Hayden mentioned, we will not get an athletic profile on Brock Bowers. He had tightrope surgery about 5 or 6 months ago. I think also maybe a back injury that kept him out of the combine.
Yeah, hamstrings, a whole bunch of things.
These have been factors. When I said this on Twitter, people got furious and just said, like, go watch the tape. Right. Guys, I get it. All right. If you want to conclude that Brock Bowers is a special athlete based on watching him, you absolutely have the right to do that. Okay. Yeah. Yep. If you want to conclude that Brock Bowers is a special athlete based on topping 20 miles per hour 4 different occasions during his college career, you absolutely have the right to do that. What I am saying, we have incomplete information here, just as we did again last season as Dalton Kincaid when I brought up the same exact conversation last year. Sam Laporta was a special athlete, and he is already a second-team All-Pro. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Brock Bowers is a superior athlete when watching him compared to Dalton Kincaid. I'm simply saying we will not get Brock Bowers' special athleticism confirmed via athletic testing, which again is used to compare prospects across decades. And if you all think that like athletic testing is just the underwear Olympics, like to me, those people have like totally lost the plot. Like you are actively sticking your head in the sand and you're missing like very helpful evaluation tools, because you're basically telling me that for hundreds of prospects every single year, you can perfectly separate bad athleticism from average to above average to good to great to special. That means you're the best scout in the world, right?
Yeah.
How often do we hear Daniel Jeremiah, Dane Brugler, Bucky Brooks, Charles Davis, whoever during NFL Combine Week say, oh, wow, I'm shocked by that time. It's a lot slower than I thought. Or, oh, didn't expect him to run that. It happens all the time. If you want to conclude that Brock Bowers is a special athlete, like what we have been talking about, that he plays like great athleticism, like a really athletic tight end in this frame, and this is why I compare him to Sam Laporta, you can do that. I'm just simply saying we have not had that confirmed via athletic testing, which has been doing this for decades at the position that it matters most. To be a special tight end, you have to be a special athlete.
Were you mad when people said you don't grind the tape? Did that tell you off? Yeah.
I mean, it is just ludicrous to assume that like, hey, you're not watching because you're just stating that athleticism is important for this position and he doesn't have athletic testing.
Let me grind this all the way down. For you, is this because we're talking about a less valuable position and we're trying to break ties? You're not calling Brock Bowers a bust. You're not saying he should be drafted 25th overall.
It's not if he's athletic or not. It's not if he's athletic or not. It is separating the good to great to special athletes. And again, what I led off with the top, special tight ends are special athletes more so than any other position. People then brought up Marvin Harrison Jr. There have been average wide receiver athletes that have been Hall of Fame wide receivers. I am not applying, because this is correct process, athleticism and athletic testing the same to every single position. It should be different. Again, special tight ends are special athletes. And we just do not know from an athletic testing standpoint if Brock Bowers is a special athlete. That was the statement.
Okay. Let's say you are the Colts. You need another receiver on the outside. You could use a tight end. A.D. Mitchell, Brock Bowers. Is that a conversation to you?
I think that is more of a conversation of what areas does Shane Steichen want to attack on the field. Okay.
So, but you're valuing them about the same. So you don't think Brock Bowers, and I don't think so either, should be taken in the top 10, but you kind of right in that next tier where things get a little bit murkier. I think that's where I value him, and it sounds like that's roughly where you
again. The comparison to me is Sam Laporta, who Ben Johnson utilized him in so many intriguing ways. Used him as the fly motion player to get up at full speed, to attack deeper portions of the middle field, to attack deeper portions outside the numbers. It wasn't just simple, usual tight end stuff, because he's also a special athlete playing the position, also a really good receiver on top of it. To me, actually comes down to which areas of the field does an offense want to attack, and is it more as an inside player versus an outside player?
Yeah, I think it's all fair. Yeah.
Okay. That does it. Brock Bowers is awesome.
I got a kick out of it when you got quote tweeted to oblivion. That was good content for me.
Only for saying that athletic testing cannot confirm that Brock Bowers is a special athlete. Yeah. Imagine that. All right. That does it. Everyone go and check out the rest of the videos that we have on the channel. So many wide receivers, so many quarterbacks, and on the way, running backs. So hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up, and we'll talk to you in the next one.